Okay, so I'm going to talk about something that maybe is not known to you, which is NgRx Entity. And that's why I titled this talk, like, why nobody told me about NgRx Entity. How many of you know about it? Okay, you are in the right talk. So let's start by a small intro. So I'm a Google developer expert, and this is a title that Google gives to active members of the community. And this allows you to go to a lot of events. And the last 2 years, I've been busy. So I've been talking in 65 events in 23 countries. So if you look for me, you probably won't find me in London. I will be some other places. As you can see, I'm basically based in Europe, but also doing some talks in US, and last year I was also going to Japan, which was really cool. This is a special moment. I'm a blogger, and this is that day then when you get 3 of your blogs featured on the Google Developers Experts publication in Medium. There are 400 GDEs in the world, so kind of I beat all of them in this screenshot. Yoo-hoo! Okay, I know. If you're blogging, you feel the same. You feel like nobody celebrates your success. But please do blog, and you will enjoy it someday. So this is other things that I do. Yesterday I was doing a training using GraphQL and React. And I guess this is a good conference because we are talking about different frameworks, and people shouldn't be scared about learning new frameworks or different ways of doing things. Most of the times you get ideas, and sometimes you can tell, maintainers of other libraries, like, have you looked into this topic? Probably they have, but it's always a good source for inspiration. Some of the things that I did last year is, because I go to a lot of events, I thought, how cool would it be to run my own conference? And the idea of this conference, which could be Frontend cruise sometime, this is Angular cruise. So that was a cruise that departed from Miami and went around the Bahamas for a week. Okay? I like to think, big. And these are some pictures from the conference. You can see these are all of the organizers. You can see me having fun. These are some of the islands that we visit. I mean, the less important thing was the conference. Some trainings that I missed. And this is the venue. I mean, I like this venue, but look at this. And the best thing is that people cannot leave. They cannot go anywhere. Perfect. So I'm going to introduce the topic of NgRx because it's a little bit advanced. And I will take the opportunity to talk a little bit about Redux. So Redux is a library that will help you do a state management. And in Angular, we have these 2 options. We either can use the original library, or we can use NgRx, which is, taking advantage of Rx.js behind the scenes. So I'm going to talk about Redux first. And Dan Abramov is the creator, and maybe you don't know this. It's a little story. So he prepared this library for React Europe. And it was the work for a talk. And then you see what happened next. Nobody was expecting that he would just release Redux during a conference. But that's something that happens during this type of events. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. So there are a few principles that we follow when we're using Redux. One of them is known as this unidirectional data flow. I'm going to show you a diagram of how this looks like. There's also the idea of a single store, which we can put all of the state of our application without scattering this all over the place in our components. This also helps helping the debugging the application. Some of the complaints of Angular 1 were that during the debugging sessions, the people were jumping from a lot of different components and modules. That means that when you get a new team member, that person needs to know almost everything before he can be productive. By using Redux, people can focus on specific features, and they don't need to know about the whole application. They can just focus on that little feature. So that's something that helps with that. There's also the concept of no side effects. And this is some kind of basic principle, which is don't use any outside state from your functions, which if you are a software engineer or you have been developing for a while, is like, yeah, I know. What do you mean? Well, it happens. And when that happens, all Redux breaks loose. So that's something that you need to take care. And what Redux is using to avoid that situation is immutability. But we are not going to delve into that. Let's look at this diagram covering all of the steps. So we start from the view. The user will do some interaction, will trigger a small message that will go to the store. That will go into the shape of an action. That store is going to run a reducer, which could be composed with multiple reducers. Today I'm going to show you some of that. That's going to create a new state, and that's going to go back to the view so it can re-render. So this is the basics of Redux. The main idea behind it, and I know it because I was there at React Europe when Dan Abramov introduced it, it was to improve developer experience. Maybe you didn't know that. And you can use the original Redux dev tools with NgRx and in Angular, everywhere. And that gives you a lot of good features. You can save and restore sessions. I mean, imagine your customers or someone that is reporting a bug, that they could just click save and send you the whole session to you. So you can just see what the user was doing at the time, and then start your debugging session from that state. That's really cool. Live debugging. Sometimes, now we have some tools that, like a storybook, which shows you in runtime how a component is behaving. This is more or less the same idea with Redux. We have this kind of tool that we can interact and then see how the UI responds without having to do any coding, which is really cool. There's also this funny feature, which is time travel. And I mean, this is kind of the double binding kind of thing. It's like, it's the first thing that you show, and people is like, okay, you can time travel. And then the other thing is that you can dispatch your own actions. So imagine you have a very complex UI, and sometimes when you are in a debugging session, you need to navigate, you need to enter some data, then navigate again. That's a really hassling debugging session. What you can do by dispatching your own actions is that you actually don't need to interact with the UI. You can just remove the UI. If you know the actions that you can use, you will just trigger those actions and then be able to keep developing. So let's see a small demo. I'm going to use the To-Do app, and I know that you will be shocked by this, and I think I've seen few other speakers using it, but I mean, sorry for that. This is going to look like this. So this is a To-Do app that I built using Angular material and also NgRx Entity. So we can see that it's just covering, common features. We have the filtering. We are going to use specific reducer for the filtering, and then we have to manage this list of to-dos. This is specifically a good use case because NgRx Entity will help us to manage lists. That's specifically to help you manage a scenario like this. So let's go to the demo. Okay, let me see if you can see everything. Okay, so I did this before. I'm going to just reload. I'm going to lose the state now. I have some initial data just to be able to show, but I'm going to collect one state. So imagine I was running into some trouble, and then I decided to share this with some developer that will try to help me. So I can just take this JSON object, load it into my DevTools, and now I have all the state in the browser. One cool thing, I will show you the time travel, of course, is replaying the session. So I'm going to replay this so you can see what I did. It seems like I want to learn Dutch. Try some Gouda cheese. That's really difficult to read for me. Okay, so that end there. So I can see exactly what I did, what the user did. So I can use this state when I'm debugging this issue. Imagine there was an issue. So that's really powerful. The other things that I can do is I can take any of these actions that you can see on the left, and I can inspect the state of the state. I can also see what was the action message. So it gives me a lot of control. Let's move on. So I wanted to show you what was the purpose of Redux, so then we can move into the technical part. So let's look into NgRx. So this is the implementation for Redux from the Angular team member, one of the Angular team members, and they try to implement Redux, but using technologies that were very useful for Angular. Well, I want to also mention some of new features that were released just a couple of weeks ago. So now we are using NgRx version 5, and we have few new features. I'm going to show you specifically this one. Manfred was talking about using schematics. We also have schematics for NgRx, and that's also covering NgRx Entity. So this is part of Angular Dev Kit, and it's something that you can integrate in your Angular CLI and create the scaffolding so you don't need to write it yourself. We also have this new feature, and it seems like Benlej is having a blast just changing the names of the things. So this was known as the lettable select operator, but now he wants us to call it pipeable select operator. We also have some other features like this custom create selector. We now support the latest version of RxJS, and just 2 days ago, they also insert this to the API upsert. It's a little bit like update or insert in the same call. So we can see here, I'm not making it up. He actually tweeted that pipeable. So you can start using that pipeable term. So Rob Worman built this NgRx library, and this is actually now a platform. So we have many packages. We have the store, we have the effects for asynchronous actions. We also have the router. We can take the state of the router and put it also in the store. We also have the DevTools, so we can see all of those nice features. We have, obviously, the NgRx Entity. And just in version 5, we now have also the NgRx schematics. I put just these marks on the packages I'm going to use on my talk. So let's talk about NgRx Store. So this is the re-implementation of Redux using RxJS, which is quite interesting for some of the features. There's support for collocation. This is a feature that came in version 4 of NgRx. And we have these two methods that now support module features. We also have now type checking for the payload. And I'm going also to cover NgRx effects, just briefly. So this will allow us to do asynchronous actions, and it will work as a middleware, so just before the store. It executes side effects, so that's going to run on the server. It also supports collocation support, so we have this support for module features. And the way it works, it will be exactly like before, but then when we reach before the store, we will run an action that will run on the background, and then we will get response that could be a success or a failure. That will go then synchronously into the store, as usually, and we will get the same features that we got before. So we just get rid of a lot of trouble of adding this asynchronous behavior. So let's move into NgRx Entity. So this is specifically to handle lists. So if you have an application which is showing a lot of widgets with lists on them, this is a good use case. It also covers high performance, so they have tried to design this library so it will perform well when you have a lot of data in these lists. So they decided to go for this entity state interface, and that's based on IDs lookup and also an entities map. So that means that when we want to access an element, we will use the lookup, which will be really fast, and then we will have access to the actual data by accessing this entities map. If you compare this data structure with array for JavaScript, is much, much faster. So it's more or less the improvement from an object to a map in ECMAScript 6. It's really fast. We also have some helpers that will be acting as an adapter, and that will come with some APIs that will just help us to build our solution. So that's covering the initial state, some operations for our reducers, covering all the common cases. There's also these get selectors that will help you to subscribe to the state for these entities. And NgRx schematics will help us to scaffold all of these boilerplate. I mean, if you have used NgRx, you know that you need to create the actions, you need to create the models, the reducers. There's a lot of work involved. Now with NgRx schematics, we can just run an Angular CLI command and get all of this done for you. We have few commands. We get the initial store, we get the effects and all of the common features. We also cover containers, which are components using the store, and it just automates the whole process. Here I can show you some of the command lines. So that's going to give you just out-of-the-box Angular CLI solution. Then you can add all of the NgRx platform dependencies and run these scaffolding commands. So every time you use this, you need to use the collection, which is NgRx schematics, and that will create the state. It will add effects, and that will also give you like best practices. Some of the things that you can learn from these templates is how you can architecture your solution. So I use that to implement the demo that I showed you before. So we have this barrel. It lives in a reducers folder, and then I can just add all of the reducers in a separate folder. So that's the filter, the current filter. And because it's a to-do entity, I didn't call it to-dos, but that's a list behind. And then we get all the actions model reducers, and they also implement the tests. So that's really useful. I can show you some examples for the filter. So that's going to create this enum. Sometimes you export some const. That's, I would say that's a recommendation from the NgRx team. Then they also wrap the actions in classes, and they have also this payload that you have to use. That's slightly different than maybe the implementation you are using today. Then you can export this and use it in your components. The reducer, it looks very much like this. We have an initial state, then the reducer is going to take the previous state and an action and run some change on the state. So we get a new instance of the state. For the to-do actions, that's a little bit more complex. That's the actual code built for NgRx schematic. So I'm just showing a little bit of it. And it's just covering all of the normal operations. So we can add to-dos, we can update to-dos, we can clear all the to-dos. And they are built in this way, the same way I show you with the filter. For the to-dos, I had to add a little code just to get a new ID for each of the entries. And you can see all of the operations that it's giving you. So it's a nice helper. And with the scaffolding, it's really working. So we have to define some parts of the model. So once you have this boilerplate, you need to actually add the information. I add the information for my to-do example. And something that will change from your default implementation is that now I'm not using an array of to-dos, but I'm using this entity state, which, if you remember, is this IDs lookup and also the entities with a map with all the to-dos. So we can compose then the reducers from these two different folders. Then I need to create some interfaces so I can define the state. And from NgRx 4, we use this action reducer map, so that will compose these two reducers. The actual way of building the selectors has changed in version 5. So now we use the pipe. That's why the name of pipeable selectors. So that looks a little bit different from the previous code. There's the setup that you get with these NgRx schematics, and that sets up the store and also the DevTools. So that gives you a good starting point. So let me show you how you actually implement one feature, so you can follow the whole process. So we start by subscribing to the store. Then we will dispatch an action from the component. We will execute the reducer corresponding to that action. That will notify the component and get the update on the view. So that's how we will subscribe. We are using an async pipe and injecting the store. That looks very familiar if you have built any NgRx. So I'm going to skip it. These are two different ways of getting the information out of the observable. You can use any of the two. For the actual action, we will trigger the action when I press enter on my input. That will trigger this add to do. And what is going to check if it's empty, it's not going to run this code. Then I prepare the to-do that I'm going to pass to the to-do actions, and that's going to trigger the reducer. So that's the next step. This is how the action will look by using NgRx Entity. So we can see that there's payload there and the type. For the actual reducer, we can use now some of the APIs that come from the library. So we can create the adapter. The adapter will be a helper that we can use in our reducers. And that will look something like this. So if we just trigger the add to do action, then we can use the adapter with some predefined APIs to just add that new instance to the list. That will take care of this lookup table and also the map for us. We also get some of the selectors by calling these get selectors on the adapter. So that's pretty handy. And that will look something like this on the state. So we have the lookup table just with the IDs. So that will work really fast. And then anytime that we want to reference the data on the different to-dos, we can use this map. You can also see the state of the filter, which is now showing all of the to-dos. Let's show a little demo. So I'm going to add a to-do and just show you this information. Or maybe I can just pick one of the actions that I did previously. So you can check here. I just pass a new to-do. This is the information. And then because it's a new to-do, it will be not complete. And then if I look at the state, I can see the lookup table for this instance, and then also see the entities. Okay. We already seen a lot of it. So if you want to know more, I can recommend you to follow the group of core members, and there's also a training course that Tomoto just released a few weeks ago. Just focus on NgRx. And also you can check the source for my demo, and there's also a stack blitz that you can use right away. Hope you have enjoyed. Thank you for listening.